Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we just returned from our Minmus mission to get ourselves some science. It was of course an ahistorical mission, so it was unpaid, but we have returned and we got a lot of science from it. We got the parts we wanted, plus we have a little bit extra in case we find any parts that we still need. So let's do some quick shuttle engineering here. I would really like to get our Mir station completed very, very soon. So we're going to be opening up the Space Shuttle beta version, and we're going to be upgrading that a bit. We'll run some simulations here, but we're really, really close to getting this into a proper functioning situation. Obviously, the wings are out of here. The aeroplane tail fins are also out of here, and for the time being, I'm going to remove this section of engine. Or am I? We're going to need to be upgrading, I think for now, yes. We're going to need to be upgrading these from mainsails, or actually kind of downgrading these from mainsails to vectors. So I want to check to see what exactly that ends up doing for our sea level thrust. 936 versus 1379. So it will definitely be significantly lower sea level thrust. So I want to take a look here, but I think that vectors, do they have wider gimbal range? Gimbal vectoring range of 10.5 degrees compared to the mainsail, which has a gimbal vectoring range of 2 degrees. So we might not actually need the secondary set of gimbals here. We'll see. For the time being, or rather the secondary set of engines here. For the time being, we can launch this as is. This is going to be very awkward here because, of course, the shuttle is substantially shorter now. And this tank is not shorter. We can drop this tank and we can bring up the altitude of these to compensate. And that will also help with the lower thrust to weight situation. So we can do something kind of like this, and then we can bring the overall position of the rocket down a bit, like so. So something a bit more along the lines of this, and then of course wings and tail fins. So we're gonna go with the spaceplane tail fin, and I kind of don't like either of those. There we go. Snapping on would help. So we'll do something like that for the fin, and then for the actual spaceplane wing, we are looking for, where is it? There's these strakes here, but that's not actually the one that we're looking for. It is in here somewhere. Hang on. Let's find it. There's that many parts that have big S in them? Okay. Well, we can definitely go for delta wings here. And I want this to be in symmetry mode. So something kind of like this. I feel like this is not necessarily the full size that we're going for. But we need to determine, so let me just save this real quick. We need to determine center of mass versus center of lift on this, right? So let's turn on our center of mass overlay and our aerodynamic overlay. Noted. Yep, that is definitely noted. So for now, that's okay. I also want to think about changing out these tanks. So that is going to mean detachment of all of this, right? But these Kerbal tanks, I believe we can now change over into being proper Mark III rocket fuel fuselages. It would need to be rotated this way, but that's a short fuselage there. We would want... That's too long. Okay, let's go with, I think, 2 or 3 of these. And then we put in our engine plate again. So it would be something kind of like that. The delta wings would go on about like so. The spaceplane tail fin we would put on about here or so, approximately. Maybe moving it back slightly. Okay. And we can definitely see our aerodynamic center is mildly awkward. We can adjust that later on as needed. We would put our landing gear on here, of course. They would go about here, but we would want to rotate them so that they are straight up and down. So yeah, something kind of like this. We'd put our gantry cranes back on here. And then we would reattach this guy. No mirror symmetry on that one, please. Thank you. So it would end up being something kind of like this. Now the question is, what is our thrust to weight on this? Well, this is clearly off, so we're going to need to move these guys all down. Thrust to weight is 1.4. So that's a little bit on the low side. Do we have access now to the larger Clydesdales? We actually do. So I'm going to ditch these guys here. There we go. And we're going to put in Clydesdales to lift us off here. So I want this to be in snapping on, and I suppose mirror mode is fine. So we would attach those about there. These are definitely significantly larger. So I would like to... Well, I'm just thinking here. Previously, we had some reaction wheels here to help out with our reaction wheel situation. That may or may not be necessary at this time. We can figure that out. So for now, let's just put in some big ol' nose cones on here. And I'm also going to add in an extra Kerbodyne tank here. Just like that. Just for size purposes. So it'll end up being something kind of like this. We no longer need this external fuel duct, in theory. Although I'm not sure how real that is. So one thing that I have, or one question that I have is, can we get an engine plate in the Mark III size? I don't think we can. Yeah, it's a little awkward. Let's put this thing out on the pad for a simulator, but first I want to get some elevons on here. So let's go into aerodynamics and get a couple of elevons. So elevon 5 are slanted. I mean, we could use like aeroplane control surfaces. I don't really want those at this moment. Elevon 1s are not really what I'm angling for either. I think actually I am angling for, well, we could actually go with the big S elevons, and that's probably the right way to go here, quote unquote. So it would be something like that, and then, oh, that's much, much larger. Okay. That's a little too large, I feel like. Oh, that's awkward angling. I see. It didn't actually attach onto the wing. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We can handle that. So that would end up going... Yeah, that's still not attached onto the wing there. So we would attach it here and then just move it over. Something kind of like that. And then this one would end up going... Turn snapping off here. Would end up going about there. And then we would end up going into, like, I don't know, an elevon 2 or so. Even that's a little on the big side. Okay, let's ditch this. What kind of size are we looking for? Not elevon 1. Are we looking for elevon 3? Approximately elevon 3 here. Okay. So we would need to make sure that this is edge on. Just trying to rotate it the correct direction here. Can be awkward. What way did that go? Is that inside? It is. Okay, so that's exactly upside down from where we want it to go. Okay, I want this, but turned around. There we go. That's where I want it. Fantastic. So then we would move this guy out this direction to about here. And then we'd be looking for, like, elevon 2s. Cool. So something along the lines of that. Then, of course, I'd be looking to snap them into position. So we would turn snapping on, and snap, snap, snap. Something kind of like that. I have no idea how this is going to fly, but that is why we simulate this. Okay, so let's see how this is going to go. We should definitely make sure that these are all combined together. 1.48 is not terrible on the thrust to weight, but it's not the best thing in the world either. So let's simulate this. I'm not 100% convinced by those elevons, that's for sure. And I'm also not 100% convinced that we'll be okay on our vectoring, but this is... I mean, vectors can do a lot more vectoring, as the name implies. It's literally 5 times as much, so... We'll see how our thrust vectoring does. And, oh, that's exciting. That's very exciting. That's not how that's supposed to work at all. This is why we simulate. So apparently these are not properly connected to each other. I guess I'm not shocked about that. One thing we should probably do is move these down like so, and then grab the decouplers and move them to be about here. So about like that. Then I would like to strut them together. That would be a helpful thing to do, for sure. So we're going to grab a strut connector, and we're going to strut this here, and we're also going to strut it up top here, just to make sure that we are holding together nicely. Now we could also consider strutting down here at the bottom, like so, and I think it's a good idea to do so. So strutting something like this, although that does not have to be in symmetry mode. So it should be something kind of like that. Okay. So something along the lines of this-ish would be the way to go. So we'll go ahead and save that and try this again. Hopefully this time it won't be so bad. Our launch ascent profile is probably going to be radically different than what we had previously prototyped. And hopefully this is just a lot smoother in general. We'll see how the gimbaling handles, but if our gimbaling is strong enough here, then we shouldn't need to have angled engines because they should just angle themselves. That would be ideal. So let's see how this goes. It's going to be interesting. Again, this is a simulation, and this is very likely to be reverted. I'm not convinced by these wings at all. We'll have to run some tests on those, but for now... Oh, we don't actually have parachutes on this either to slow us down. Well, honestly, I would be surprised if we get to the termination phase of this, so I'd be surprised if this even makes it to orbit. We'll find out. So insufficient gimbaling then. Okay, so we'll revert that back. That is indeed what that says to me, is that our gimbaling on these vectors is insufficient and that we need to rotate this engine plate some amount this direction. We're going to start it like this, and hopefully the gimbaling can counteract that once we get higher up. Hopefully that will be good enough, and as I said before, we don't have parachutes on this, so let's put a pair of drogue chutes on this, and I want this in mirror mode. We'll just drop those right here at the back. Looks good. Okay, let's try this again. I was hoping that the gimbaling on the vectors would be enough, but sadly, it was not enough to overcome that. We'll see if it's enough with a little bit of angling here. That said, we have a lot more thrust in the SRBs and a lot less thrust out here. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. Throttle up, kill rot, and off we go. Well, that's a better sign right off the bat. Okay, that definitely looks decent. Let's try bringing this over on the 90-degree side just a little bit here. So this way we're at least getting some horizontal speed in the correct direction rather than the wrong direction. So far it seems okay. And we do burn through this fuel less quickly. So our SRBs should stay attached for quite a while yet at this point. So let's try to follow a relatively standard ascent trajectory and see what happens. So we're going to go here until apoapsis of 20K, then we're going to go to orbital prograde and just see what happens in this ascent trajectory. So 18, 19, 20. We're going to hit prograde here. That seems quite controllable thus far. The real question is what happens after these SRBs fall off. Keep in mind, these do have gimbaling in them, and this will significantly change our mass as well as significantly changing our overall thrust position, like thrust to mass position, I guess we should say, something along those lines. So we stay here until we burn out these SRBs. Okay, that's an issue. Noted. So we lose a wing if we detach those right away. As a hypothetical, are we controllable if we move this to the horizon right now? Yes, we are. And that's without a wing. This is a good sign. This is a very good sign. Okay. We've got our apoapsis up to like 130 right now. We could easily achieve orbit here. We do need a fair amount of additional speed. So our primary issue here, and I am going to revert this, our primary issue is the timing on that detachment. We don't have to detach these tanks, or these SRBs, to be clear. Or we could detach them shortly before they burn out, like 3 seconds before they burn out, and have them fly off on their own. That's also an option. But this seems extraordinarily controllable with the vectors, so that seems good. Now we need to do some re-entry testing, but before we do that, I want to work on our docking system. So this currently is just a Clampatron docking port, right? And eventually we're going to want this to be like the Canadarm sort of concept. So the way that of course worked is we should have like a hinge, or actually we should probably have like a rotation servo here. So we start with a rotation servo, and I want it to be rotated a particular direction. Not these directions. Okay, it's currently mounted on the outside, and that is not where we want it mounted. We want it mounted on the inside here. So maybe we should actually attach it to, like, one of these gyroscopes. That might be the way to go here. If I can get it to snap onto those. I mean, I suppose we could put it here. It's a really bad place to put it. I would like it to, there we go, snap on right there. Then we would go for an alligator hinge, although not this size of one. Probably one of these smaller ones. And that would go right on top of here. So in order to get these to snap together better, I'm going to work on this out here, where we can, you know, connect it to something that kind of makes sense to connect it to, at least as far as the game is concerned. So something kind of like this, and then we would connect this guy right here. There we go. Okay, so then we would have this target. This would be folded up for right now. We'd be going for smaller hydraulic cylinders here. So this would end up being something kind of like this, although that's backwards from the way I want it to go. And then we would have an additional rotation servo. In fact, we'd basically just duplicate this again. And we would attach that here. And then we'd duplicate it again and attach that here. And then we'd have whatever attachment point we wanted here. And I guess for purposes of making sure that this matches rotation, it would end up being something kind of like this. So eventually we'd be able to extend this out some amount, although these 1P2s are not particularly great at this. So maybe we would upgrade these to 1P4s. So then that would mean ditching this, grabbing this, going to a 1P4. Just, they're a little bulkier, but they allow us to reach out a fair amount further. Is this the right direction? Yes, it is. Fantastic. So then we would attach this guy right on here like that, and then do it again. And now we can extend this out quite a ways if we want to do any robotic arm work, which of course we're going to want to do. So that's fine. We're going to ditch this for now. And on the end of this, I'm actually going to put a grab arm. So we're going to use an advanced grabbing unit junior here, just for size constraint purposes. And we'll put that right on there like that. So that's the arm that we're going to be using. And that should go in around here-ish, but I really want that to be inside of the bay here. That would be nice to have that in the bay rather than out of the bay. I don't want it to burn up on re-entry. So I guess we move it inward here to be about there or so. Okay, now obviously this needs to be folded up. And to that end, I'm going to move these aside. And we're going to move this up here. Then I want to rotate it to be facing this direction. Okay, Now we're going to need to fold this thing inside, and I think the best way to do that would probably be, for now, well, we can actually do this a number of different ways, but for now we could have this simply be folded up kind of like, well, that's obviously, we're going to need it folded up more than this, right? So I think what I want this to do is I want to grab tool, thank you. I want to be at 90. And then we have this be at 90. And this is kind of close, right? It's kind of tucked away inside here. But that would definitely fit for now. So then this would be closed and everything is, in theory, inside of here, except for these rechargeable batteries, which actually looks like they need to be moved in a little bit. That's fine. We've got a little bit of spare room here. So we could definitely do something kind of like that. We can move these guys out to be approximately the same. Like that. There we go. Now, as far as actually bringing something up here, I kind of want to get rid of these reaction wheels. I don't think that they are, strictly speaking, needed anymore. They mostly only existed for purposes of control before we had the vectors. So we'll test it. I don't think they're necessary. I did not want to have them in here in the first place if I could help it. So for now, we're going to move these guys out to take up less space here. I want to then move the arm up to about here or so. So we've got a little bit of room in here. Then what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually angle this guy a little bit differently. So we're going to go for about like a 30-degree bend here. And then we're going to go for maybe a 30-degree bend here as well, or maybe a 60. I'm not sure how that's going to do. That fits. Okay, cool. So something along the lines of that. This might flop around a bit during flight. That's probably okay. But we need to build the actual docking adapter here. So that's okay. That is absolutely something that we're going to do. So to that end, we can take a look at what that looks like here. And this is the grab arm here. Actually, they really only had the one bend in it, didn't they? Interesting. We can actually downsize this arm a bit then. So this bend, and then this gets downsized here. So we would ditch this, and we would just put the grabbing unit junior right here, looking at that reference. So it would be more along the lines of this for our manipulator arm. That fits a lot easier, so that does make sense. And then as far as the actual vehicle goes here that we want to bring, this is really just an adapter, right? So it really just has that situation where we want to adapt from one size to another. So step one on that is going to be to have a docking port, and we can actually get rid of this search. So a docking port, this connects us up to the station, right? So that's fine. Then on the other side, we want to have a docking port junior. So something kind of like this for right now. And in between, we're going to need something. Something. For right now, I'm going to put this docking port here, and then I'm going to duplicate it for purposes of constructing this. Obviously, we're not going to keep it there. But we need something here, and it needs to be kind of orangey, and it needs to have, like, an inflatable look. Do we have anything that's really inflatable? The inflatable airlock. I mean, that's definitely an interesting concept, but it only has the one attachment point, which is the problem. Yeah, I don't think that's really what we're going for then. So something not along the lines of that. In that case, we might go for like a, we might just go for something structural here. So we might just go for something along the lines of, not service bay. Hang on, these are payloads. I wanted structural. So that would end up being like a structural fuselage. So this is intended to just be pretty much empty, right? And then on this side, we would have the smaller docking port, although we would probably want to have an adapter here. And that would end up being something kind of like this. Oh, that did not go correctly. So something kind of like that would be what we would go for. Really, really simple. It does not need to be anything extreme here. So this grabbing unit, for the time being, we could definitely position that in here as like an attachable. This is not something that is necessarily having to be attached there. And we would just use this docking port junior for right now. So that would go there. And then we would want to have this be coming from this as the root part. So let's flip this around real quick here. Yeah, that's not going to work. We'd have to rebuild it from this side. That's okay. So we would do something like this, then something like this, then something like this, and then something like this. Okay. We ditch this as our docking port here. And then, of course, we need to actually have this be stowed correctly. So I think that we should be able to get away with having it stowed. That's very long. It would definitely be clipping in, stowed like this, but maybe that's okay. We can probably get additional space, though, by moving it out this direction a little bit. That does get us some additional space. And then stowing this at a bit of an angle like that is almost certainly going to clip through. Almost certainly. So as a potential other option, what if we didn't do that at all and instead had a decoupler in here? So this would be something like a, not even a TD12, something like a TD06 decoupler. Okay, so that would go right there. Then we would grab this and we would attach it right here. Then the idea would be that we would have this be back at 0. And then this would be at 90. Then we would decouple this and move it out with the arm and then dock it up. That's a potential option. So then we would have a spare... Oh, I did not mean to grab that. Oh, this reset? That's very sad. We'd put it like this, and then we would bring this up to 90, like so. We'd have a spare grab arm in here. We can swap between our two tools. We would, of course, need an engineer to do that. But we can swap between our two tools by doing that. We want to be in coupling, a grabbing unit junior, and we would just stow that, like, down here for now. In fact, we could start with the docking port junior installed, because that does make sense. We'd be able to just grab it and maneuver it and dock it up to the platform, and then release it, put on this docking port, and then use that. That would be the idea here. Yeah, that seems to work quite well, I think. And honestly, I think we can ditch the beta from this. So let's just call this Shuttle at this point. Now, we still need to do a little bit of testing here. We're not quite ready to do a real flight, and I want to get that testing done this episode. So let's do a quick orbital test here. Make sure that this is going to work for us to get to orbit, and then return home. That's the idea here. We get to orbit, we return home, all should be good, in theory. Assuming the elevons are okay, assuming the wings are good enough, and assuming we didn't mess anything else up, which I don't think we did. So throttle up, kill rot, let's make our way out to space on this test flight. We are not going to Mir in this particular flight. So for now, we're just going to angle ourselves about here, and up we go. So we're going to get ourselves some apoapsis here. This is definitely feeling very controllable compared to the previous iteration. I do like the concept of ditching these about like 3-ish seconds before they run out of fuel. I think that's a reasonable concept. So let's go up to about an apoapsis of 20 kilometers. If we're doing that, we should be okay to just go directly over to horizontal velocity up at 20 kilometers. So that should be reasonably fine here. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 kilometers. Okay, let's head over towards horizontal velocity up. We're pretty angled off here. I'm going to take this over to Kilrot. We want to be right here at 90 degrees for right now. This is very, 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 very stable. Wow. This is incredibly controllable. We've got about 10 seconds left on our SRBs here. And we can see time to apoapsis is going down, so we definitely do want to get some more verticality here. Okay, checking thrust to weight. Thrust to weight looks good. We're carrying these SRBs a little bit longer than we need to here because I want to pull prograde over a little bit. So we're clearly a little bit off on our ascent profile, no doubt about that, but this thing is incredibly controllable. We're going to bring this up a little bit here. I think we're fine to continue burning here for a good long time. We've got lots of orange tank fuel left. We're not dipping into any of our Mark III rocket fuel fuselage yet, which is good because that is what we're intending to use in orbit, right? So that's fine. At this point, we can see our apoapsis height is still a little on the low side. So that's actually indicative of the fact that we have a lot of horizontal speed right now. Let's head over towards the horizon at this juncture. This is still extremely maneuverable. And that's very good. That's very, very good. And yes, we're upside down. This is the way this is actually supposed to be done. At this point, I'm wondering what happens if we ditch these. Well, we could find out. We see apoapsis height of 70 kilometers right now. I think it's probably okay to ditch them. Probably. But we'll see. Going to horizontal velocity up. Let's wait until we're in vacuum to ditch them. So I'm going to continue burning for now. We've got lots of fuel in the big orange tank, so that seems okay. I'm not too concerned about our fuel quantity. Yeah, this gets us to orbit nicely, even carrying these SRBs, which, to be clear, our final plan is not to carry the SRBs like this. I'm just concerned about when to detach them. I'm going to call this good for our coast. We're in space now, so I'm ditching these. Going to get us a little bit of speed to pull us out of here. Okay, we're clear. That's spicy. Getting rid of these is definitely on the spicy side. No doubt about that one. Okay, so all we're looking to do here is make our way into orbit and then recover this safe and sound. Now, we don't actually have to land on land with it, but we probably should try. So we can see we've got plenty of Delta V to get to orbit. We've got some extra Delta V in this tank if we don't carry all of these. That sounds good. Let's position ourselves over for this node. One thing that we are lacking at this moment is a way to generate electric charge other than running our engines. That is definitely noted, but we have lots and lots of batteries, so I don't think I'm too concerned about that, all things considered. Okay, 50 seconds, 40, 30, 20, 10, and 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's see how this handles. It jiggles around a little bit, that's for sure. We're chasing the node here. Okay, this is good enough. We're in orbit here. So that instability that you see here, this is only because the node was moving on us. If we were on Kilrot, that wouldn't have been happening, or if we had just been on prograde. So that's absolutely fine there. I'm not concerned about that. At the periapsis, let's try bringing this on down and see what a return would look like. We may end up having a splashdown, and it would also be interesting to see what that ends up looking like. I don't know. We'll find out. So let's bring this over to the node. And we're going to bring this right on around. We've got lots of fuel left in the big orange tank. We are not going to be re-entering with the big orange tank. I want to be clear about that. That's not going to be happening. So over we go. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Okay. Let's see how this goes. 40 seconds. 30. 20. 10. And 3, 2, 1, 0, mark. So we're just holding retrograde here because the node is moving on us. That's fine. We've actually overshot our periapsis here a bit. I'm going to bring us around to prograde. I don't want to be quite hitting the ground here, although in theory our wings will change that, but I have no idea what the flight profile of this thing is going to be like. It's going to be interesting. I think that's very clear. So, southern ice shelf. We're not over the southern ice shelf. Okay. I don't know why it said that we were there for a moment. We definitely are not. So we're going to bring this up to about 10 kilometers. There we go. And let's ditch our big orange tank now. There's very little fuel left in it. And we've not burned any of this fuel. So this is going to be a heavier than normal re-entry. And we'll just see how that ends up going. So over we come here. Oh, this was in the same decouple. Okay, that's our payload there. We're not going to have that be the case. That's definitely not going to be a thing. So we're going to position ourselves probably a little bit up here and try to come in at a bit of an angle. We'll see how holding attitude here goes. I'm not 100% convinced that this is going to be fine, but we'll see. I wouldn't mind re-entering at like a 45-degree angle, just for additional drag purposes. So let's physics warp forward and see what happens as we attempt to hold attitude. I see that we are currently not actually holding attitude here. Kill rot, please. Okay, I think this is just due to our orbital velocity here. I think that's the reason why that's dragging. So that's okay. We're just increasing our amount of drag here, and this engine plate actually doesn't need to be here, so that can be moved like so. That's all staging issues. We can solve that later. We could, of course, look to land this thing with a powered landing with this amount of fuel, but that is not what I'm looking to do in this particular situation. So we can see that we are currently losing horizontal speed, and we are currently losing vertical speed as well. So that's good. We're not even translating horizontal speed into vertical speed right now. We're just straight up losing speed. Now, this is going to be an interesting thermal test. In reality, the space shuttle had thermal tiles for this reason down here to act as heat shields. And that was a big part of the reason why the vehicle was as expensive as it was the thermal tiles. We don't have those. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening here for sure. We're just looking to ditch as much of our speed as we can here. If things get too spicy, then we'll switch over to surface velocity up. We'll see. For now, though, we're interested in the additional drag that this brings. Also, we're going to want to extend our landing gear eventually. So I think that's just a gear action group by default. I'll test that once we are in a better place for it. It looks like this is probably going to end up being a splashdown. We definitely are still controllable, which is a good sign. And we're bleeding speed relatively quickly here, which is also a good sign. So we're going to try to fly this thing down, right? But it looks like we're coming in for a water landing. Ooh, we are actually struggling to pull down here. We're going up. Yikes. Okay. So we're currently flipping around. That's noted. This is not ideal. Okay. We'd like to bring this right on around. We could use our engines to reorient ourselves. But this just indicates to me that we were a little bit too ambitious on our approach vector there. That's okay. We're going to bleed off a lot of speed here. We can bring this around with our engines, which I think is what we're going to do here. Okay, that put us into this spin. Noted. We'll see how we come out of that spin. That depends on aerodynamics. We've put this thing through some aerodynamic stress, that's for sure. But this just indicates that I was being a little bit ambitious on the And this also indicates that our aerodynamic stability is not where we want it to be. We're going to want to adjust the position of these wings a little bit, but overall, I think this is a pretty successful test of this vehicle. Believe it or not, this is what success looks like. Really, this just means that we want to be a little bit less extreme with how we came in, and we just want to come in at, like, surface velocity up. That'll be fine. So let's get this brought on around here. We're slowing down dramatically at this point. And there's definitely a lot of tumbling going on here. No doubt about that. But let's just try yanking this on around. Also, we can deploy our drogues, which will naturally want to pull us around as well. So our drogues want to naturally be at the back of the vehicle here. And let's toggle our gear action group as well. We're starting to enter a bit of a spin here. That is certainly noted. So our aerodynamic profile definitely needs some work. I'm wondering what happens when our chutes deploy here, though. So let's physics warp down a little bit. We're definitely spinning, no doubt about that. It's a good trick. And we're going to see what happens when our chutes deploy. Okay, so there's chute deploy. Okay, that brings us around to the direction that we want to be. At this point, we want to pull up and try to get some flight going here. But it's a little late. But, actually, I mean, we lost our engines, but that worked surprisingly well. So I'm going to call that a successful test. We have a few things to iron out on the re-entry, but overall, that space shuttle, it's working. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Andy McGar, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.